Hello, Dan here. Apologies for the poor sound quality. It will improve when the main feature of the episode starts. Just a quick heads up about this episode, which is not quite what we intended to release at this time. This is the chat between Howard and myself about The House That Dripped Blood, and it fits in with our Lee Cushing series of conversations that we've been undertaking for 10 years now, very occasionally. This, however, is going to be a basic edit of that conversation. A more expansive and slick version with clips and musical interludes and a comedy sketch will be included in a later release, and if you're a Patreon supporter, you will get that release first. But this version, which is going out today, is just the basic chat, and it's going out in this form because I wanted it to be part of our schedule for October, and the full version will probably take a little bit longer. Another note is that the original plan for this discussion was that it would conclude with a short run-through of all the subsequent Amicus anthology horror films that followed The House That Dripped Blood. However, we did record that chat and it turned out to be much longer than we thought it would, so it's going to form its own separate episode, and you'll hear that in a couple of weeks, hopefully. But for now, you can hear Howard and I talking about The House That Dripped Blood. If you're a Patreon supporter, you will get an improved version of this episode later, but right now, if you are a Patreon supporter, you'll be able to see a video version of next week's episode, which is a chat between Howard, myself, and Spider Dan about the Halloween film Halloween Kills, just in time for Halloween. So enjoy that right now if you can, if you're a Patreon supporter. Everybody else, it will come out next week. For the moment, though, here's Howard and myself talking about The House That Dripped Blood.
Now the podcast starts.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the podcast on which we talk about horror. Sometimes we talk about other things, and sometimes we swear. I am your host for this episode, T.D. Velasquez, author of a chapter in a book about British horror films, and my friends call me Dan, and I'm absolutely delighted that I'm here with my friend and yours, the great actor and raconteur Howard Whittock.
Hello, it's nice to be back. And here we are, in the same room at the same time.
Yes.
It's been a long time since we've done that, yes.
Absolutely.
I'm Howard, yes, author of several begging letters to leading personalities. Yes, it's great, isn't it? Here we are. And it is 10 years since we recorded our first one.
Yes,
Can you believe that?
It is.
Good.
I suddenly thought today, Cushing and Lee were making films together for about 25, 26 years, I think.
Yes.
By 10 years in, they'd already done 5 or 6 films of those, I'm sure. I think 10 years in, we've done maybe 5 or 6 podcasts.
Yes, I know. But a great deal of care goes into these podcasts. We don't rush them, we do a lot of research, so yes.
We're still very enthusiastic about them. And seeing as you mentioned how much research we do, and I mentioned that I'm in a book, that hopefully will demonstrate how we have developed in our expertise since this podcast started. Because I was published last year in a book called Critical Readings on Hammer horror films. I wrote the chapter about Brides of Dracula.
What a great film that is. Yes. I'm not sure I've developed in my expertise particularly. I think I just got older, but not necessarily wiser. But
I think you have.
No, I mean, it was a different world then, wasn't it? 10 years ago. Blimey, Well, actually, I mean, we've all been through a lot. I've been through a lot since
Yes.
that. I'm not going to go into details now, but it has been a bit of an emotional roller coaster for me, well, for all of us, really,
Yeah.
what we've been through in these last 10 years. So, but it's nice to be back and talking about these films that we love. So they're so much a part of my childhood anyway.
Yes.
And, well, life, really, because I continue to watch them. So, but I first watched them as a teenager, and this one particularly that we're going to talk about today, I remember.
Yes, well, let's talk about that. So today we're going to talk about The House That Dripped Blood, which is the second of the Amicus anthology films to feature both Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. It's not the second film of the whole series, it's the third. And we talked about the first film that they were both in, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, on our second ever Lee Cushing episode of the podcast, recorded back in 2015. And on that episode, we also talked about some of the other anthology films that kind of were related to Dr. Terror's or came between Dr. Terror's and this one. So we discussed Torture Garden from 1968. And we discussed a film called Tales That Witness Madness.
Witness Madness.
Because that movie it was directed by the same director of Dr. Terror and written by one of the actors, even though it's a later film. This movie, The House That Dripped Blood, was filmed in 1970. It started filming in June 1970 and in some places is listed as having been released in 1970. So they filmed and finished the whole movie presumably in less than 6 months, which is kind of amazing.
They got him out quick in those days. No hanging about in those days.
Well, it did make me think, filming schedules are very long now. Nothing gets made quickly anymore. But, I had the privilege of speaking to Mickey Rooney once. I saw him do a one-man show in Leeds.
You spoke to Mickey Rooney?
Well, briefly. I mean, I was in the audience. And
Good heavens.
He called out to the audience. He was telling stories about his film career, and he said, "Has anybody seen the movie Boys Town?" That's the one. With
I've not seen it, but I know what it
Tracy.
is. Spencer Tracy, yeah.
And he said, "How long do you think it took us to make that movie?" And I had just graduated in film studies, so I put my hand up straight away and said, 2 weeks. And he went, anyone else? And somebody else said 2 years, and he went, 2 years, God help me. Anybody else? And somebody said 6 months, and then he pointed at me and said, you were right first, 2 weeks. So it's like in those days they could crank out a motion picture in 2 weeks.
Well, in the studio system, yes, because it was all regulating. Everybody knew their business and everything, so films were made pretty quickly in those days. But I'm kind of Amicus and Hammer's made films quickly because they're trying to save money. So get it.
Yeah, and sometimes they'd make 2 films at once and such.
They make 2 films with the same sets. Hammer would certainly make 2 films with the same sets. Because if you watch Plague of the Zombies and then The Reptile, you're thinking, wait a minute, I recognise those. I recognise that graveyard.
Yes.
Those steps. But so 1970.
So yes, we're in 1970, and this movie, The House That Dripped Blood, was the next Amicus production after another movie that we've spoken about, Scream and Scream Again. And like that movie, it was originally intended to feature all 3 of the iconic stars of that film, Cushing and Lee and Vincent Price, but Price was not available ultimately. But we did get Cushing and Lee in one film, although they don't actually meet in this film, unlike in Dr. Terror. So this movie, like Torture Garden, was written by Robert Bloch, the great American horror writer whose novel began the film Psycho. And it is directed, though, by someone who had never made a feature film before, a guy called Peter Duffell. I think Duffell is how
we were talking about whether to prefer. I think Duffell.
Yes.
I think he would prefer Duffell. Sounds a bit more distinguished.
He directed some TV. He'd done half an episode of The Avengers, which I've seen. There's an episode called The Winged Avenger.
That one.
And he started shooting it, and then he was replaced halfway through by Gordon Fleming. Jason Fleming's dad, who also directed the Doctor Who films for Amicus. And
that's a good Winged Avenger. It's a good one. It's got Nigel Green.
It is very good, yeah. I keep watching that over the years. And I think one of the producers did say they didn't fire Peter Duffell because he was bad. He just didn't have the right sensibility for it. Right. And he does seem to have a distinct style. Certainly when you compare this movie to the other Amicus films.
Well, I was thinking this when I watch it again. It seems much more, in a way, much more kind of sophisticated and a bit more restrained and a bit more serious. The first two, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, which I love, and Torture Garden, which got the penguin in, so I love that as well. They're very 60s. And they're very colourful and gaudy and a bit wacky and a bit goofy and killer pianos and crawling hands and everything like that. And it's done in that way. A bit like the Avengers, sort of slightly bit kind of playful and fantastical, whatever. This one seems much more kind of serious. It's much more restrained and a bit more subtle and everything. There's lots of literary allusions going
There's a sombreness to it, isn't there?
And Peter Duffell wanted to call it Death and the Maiden.
Yeah.
And Milton Subotsky, the great Milton Subotsky, who I admire very much, said, no, you can't do that. No, you got to sell this picture. You know, people got to know it's a horror movie. So they called it the much more subtle title, The House That Dripped Blood, even though there's no blood in it. Which is
and even though the house doesn't really have much to do with it.
No, it doesn't really.
According to a quote from Robert Bloch that's given in English Gothic, it sounds like the Amicus producers, Subotsky and Rosenberg, approached him and gave him the linking theme and just said, can you find 4 of your stories to connect into this theme? So it's probably not his idea to base it around the house.
No.
Because it would make sense for it not to have been his idea because the stories do not link to the house in a very organic way.
No, they try to make it at the end. So the estate agent, Mr. Stoker, says, have you discovered the secret of the house?
Yeah.
It reflects the personalities of the people. I think, no, it doesn't. It doesn't do that at all. You're trying to find something to connect it all together, but that doesn't really kind of work.
Yes. Since we've talked about the end, we should say that we're going to approach this in the same way that we did Dr. Terror's, which is that we'll avoid spoilers for most parts of it.
Right. That's not easy in these sort of things.
It's not too easy, but it also means that we can't dwell on too many details because we have essentially got 4 films to talk about here. Although the ones that we'll discuss in most detail are the ones with Cushing and Lee in, so it's really the two, which I think are the 2 best segments.
Yes.
Let's get to that.
Yes.
But anyway, but the point is, even though this is rather an old film, we're encouraging people to discover it,
yes.
I think. So therefore, let's not give too much away.
Right,
but
okay,
talk
yes,
about
right.
what each segment is roughly about and who's in it and things. So yeah, the linking story in The House That Dripped Blood, which must have been a nightmare to direct because it features 3 actors all called John.
Yeah.
John Bennett, John Malcolm, and
John Bryan.
I
just want to say a few words because
go on.
One of the reasons I wanted to do these podcasts in the first place is because I wanted to pay my tribute to all these wonderful actors that appeared in all these films. Who we know, Andre Morel and Duncan Lamont and all these people, Rosalie Crutchley and Ursula Howells. I think they're just great. And John Bennett is one of those actors who is just, he's not the kind of actor, he didn't get awards, he didn't get any honours, you wouldn't see him on chat shows, but he was one of those actors who was always brilliant in everything he was in. Forsyte Saga, I Claudius, whatever it was, Porridge he's in and all sorts of things. And he's always great. And he's just, I think those actors really sort of make these kind of films. The Amicus films have a lot of big stars in, or perhaps people who were big stars once upon a time. But they also have lots of great character actors in as well. And he's one of those great character actors.
I agree. I know him from his performances in Doctor Who mainly, but he's also in lots of British TV. He's in I Claudius. And he carried on working for a long time. He was in Jonathan Creek.
Oh yes, he kept going. He was doing things right up to the end. He only died in his 70s. And interestingly, just after he made, or a year or so after he made House of Dripped Blood, he made another brilliant horror film called The House in Nightmare Park.
Oh, I didn't know he was in that.
Yes,
right.
he is. He plays a sort of a manservant
Right.
with the great Frankie Howard,
Right.
which is it's one of the very few films, horror comedy films, which is scary and funny.
Right.
Very few manage it.
Right.
Because they try to be too obvious or, but it actually is scary. The bits where Frankie Howard was walking around the house, something's out to get him, are scary. But Frankie Howard's a great comic, so it's funny as well. And it's got Hugh Burden in and Rosalie Crutch in that. So yeah, he's in that as well. And that's
I
a great
must
film.
watch that.
You must, because it is funny and it is scary.
I didn't realise John Bennett had another horror film. I thought this was the only one.
It's a horror comedy, I don't know. I think if it was in the book, it would be under the comedy section rather than the horror section. But it's all.
While we're talking about comedy, you mentioned that this movie is kind of more serious, more sombre, thoughtful. It's got a bit of self-reflexivity to it, like some of the books that get lingered on are books about movies.
Yes.
But also there's a broad comedy episode in it, and there's a certain amount of parody, a certain amount of I think there are points at which it is a bit spoofy in a way that maybe goes further than the others, but it does also have these very sombre segments as well. I mean, the two middle segments especially are very straight-faced.
Yeah. I think there's less humour in it than in almost any of the others.
Okay.
I know. I when I watched it again, I thought this is more serious than such a contrast to what had come before it. But I thought this was kind of like the most literary, the most literate, and the most, like you say, thoughtful and just very restrained for a British horror film of that time.
We've mentioned the setup with the three actors called John, so we should just explain what that is. So a film star has gone missing. We find out about him later on. But the detective investigating the disappearance is played by John Bennett, and he's come down from Scotland Yard. So presumably this house is somewhere very down south. It's south of London.
Yes.
But the main local policeman we meet, played by John Bryans.
John Malcolm is the policeman.
Oh, sorry, Malcolm. Yeah, sorry.
He used to be in a series called Enemy at the Door, so I remember him.
And he sounds like a Yorkshireman to me.
I think he was a northerner, yes.
But he does say, thank you for coming down from Scotland Yard. Rather, couldn't they just change that to up? I don't know. But, the local policeman says it's not the first time something strange has happened to somebody connected with that house, and he proceeds to tell the inspector a series of stories about different people having weird things happen to them, all linked by the house. But actually, it doesn't really link to the case that he's on, and he just looks more and more frustrated every time we come to the end of a story, and it cuts to John Bennett kind of going, "What a load of rubbish." So I think it's a bit of a weak linking story in a way, even though it does have that. It has got the great John Bennett as its linchpin. But
the linking story is always kind of interesting. I think they were trying to do something a little bit different. I think there are too many Amicus anthology films where the linking story is they're all dead.
Yeah.
Or they're all in hell, or they're all waiting to go to hell. And I think not a lot of thought. At least they've tried to do something a little bit different with this one,
That's
as
true.
with the Silent one and two of the others. Sort of like the house is the linking thing, even though the house is not that. It's just they happen to be living in that house at that time when the house doesn't really affect anything that's going on. So that's just. But I think it's a bit more interesting linking story than perhaps some of the others.
yes, that's a fair point. We're going to focus mainly on the segments featuring Cushing and Lee, but we're obviously going to mention all of them. So the first segment, which is a story that's told to the inspector about something that's previously happened to somebody in the house, is a story starring Denham Elliott, who's one of the above-the-title stars of this movie. It's kind of a nice notion to me that this movie, like Dr. Terror's and Dr. Gallen, has a series of names above the title when you watch the opening credits, and all of the actors above the title are essentially the leads in the different stories.
Yes.
It's funny that the later Amicus anthologies after this never did that again. They always just kind of listed all the.
Well, they roll in alphabetical order,
yeah.
And it's kind of it's quite amusing that means that the most famous person in it is usually at the end.
Right.
Like Tales from the Crypt, the last name to go up is Ralph Richardson.
Right, yeah.
Who I think would probably be the biggest star. The last name in Vault of Horror is Terry Thomas. who would at least be the perhaps most surprising name anyway.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of... and he's like, Robin Phillips? Who's Robin Phillips? But yeah, so he was all in alphabetical order to kind of make them all seem like they were big stars. Even though some were bigger stars than others. Yeah, but there's 5 people above the title here, and then...
Yes.
and
which is Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing...
Denham Elliott, Nigel Dawn Porter,
That's
and John
right.
Pertwee. But there's also a lot of people in the credits where it says, and Tom Adams, and David Pitt, and Chloe Franks, and...
So this segment has Denham Elliott and Tom Adams, and also Joanna Dunham, who gets with Joanna Dunham in the opening credits. And the concept of the first segment is that at some point a horror writer and his wife moved into the house because the writer was working on a new book and wanted somewhere appropriately Gothic to work on his fiction. And that character is Denham Elliott. And he creates a new character of a serial strangler. And because this is a movie and you have to be able to see things, before he writes a word, he draws a picture of the guy so that we know what he looks like. And then as he starts to write the story, he starts to see the figure that he's drawn kind of appearing in the grounds of the house, watching him from across the river and things. And he's this apparition played by Tom Adams, and the writer starts to fear that he's going mad, or is he really being played by this supernatural creature? What do you think of this?
Yeah,
story?
I think it's good. I mean, it reminded me, I say we can't do any spoilers, but it did remind me of a lot of films that came out in the 60s. Hammer did a few, like A Taste of Fear, and where people are seeing things and are they real and what's going on and everything. And sort of Denham Elliott is always brilliant at playing twitchy, neurotic people. He can do it better than anybody.
He's brilliant at being afraid.
Yes, he is. Yes,
you really get that. Yeah,
and it is scary when he sees Tom Adams, the Dominic, the killer. He's over there. Look, he's over there. Yeah. And Joanna Dunn looks, no, there's nobody there. No, he's over there. He's gone over there.
Yeah, can't you see he's moved across the room? It's what I always remember that moment.
But it is scary. Yes, but yes, it is. Watching that, I thought this is quite spooky. This works quite well, sort of. Then he goes to see a psychiatrist who seems even more mad than anybody else in the.
Oh yes, he's played by Robert Lang, who would sort of turn up as villains in episodes of Thriller or The New Avengers.
The New Avengers, sort of,
yes, and we won't say any more about the story, but I do think it is probably the weakest story in the film.
I think
people have really criticised it, but at the same time, I think it works okay.
I think it works okay as watching. I think it's well done. But I don't think it's a very original idea.
Right.
And you can sort of guess, if you've seen this sort of thing before, you know where it's going.
Yeah.
So, but all the actors are great. Joanna Dunham is great, Denham Elliott's always great. So it's watchable, yes. It's not one that stands out, but it's kind of, it's a nice one to begin with, so it gets you into the film. And
what are your associations with Tom Adams before you saw this film?
Well, Tom Adams, not many. The Great Escape.
Is he in that?
I think he's in The Great Escape as one of the... He doesn't do much, but he's there.
Well, so he's a character actor in the 60s. He's in The Avengers. He turns up in Doctor Who later. So I know what he was kind of doing around then. But from my teenage years, he is mainly known as the man from the DFS adverts.
Yes, I remember that. Yes. So, yes, he was in a lot of those adverts, yes. I think they tried to build him up as a star in the 1960s. He was in a couple of spy films. I think one's called Where the Bullets Fly or something like that, or a kind of a low-budget James Bond thing, as if they were trying to... And he did one in Italy as well. So when he would do this film, perhaps he was quite famous.
Right.
And Tom Adams.
He's got a very powerful voice.
Oh, yes.
But to the extent that it's almost like parodic. It's too strident and too charismatic almost. So... He would be good in like a spoof James Bond, but he wouldn't be a James Bond.
No, I think it was a kind of spoof James Bond, what he did, or a light-hearted thing anyway. I mean, very few people have seen those films, so it didn't really take off. But I think he were trying to build him up as a star in the late 60s. And I think he was in a couple of TV series.
And he's a good 70s. Actor as well.
He's a good actor. They're all good actors in this. The thing about this, they are all good actors in this film. There's no weak links when it comes to the performances.
But I do just think that ultimately his fate in the 1990s of telling people that they could buy cheap sofas.
Do you ever?
Yes. I mean, that was the perfect use of him. He had the real commanding voice for that.
But
there's no level of seriousness to it because it's always hard to
once you do that
fully
sort of thing,
seriously.
Once you do that sort of thing, it's quite hard to go back.
Yeah.
And, there's an actor called Patrick Allen who did Barrett's Home, as in he'd be flying around in a helicopter. Well, once you've done that, it's like, that's how people see you.
His voice is still the voice of the X Factor now, because even though he's been dead for 10 years or so, as soon as he died, the voice mimic, what's he called?
Peter Dixon.
And when I first heard that, because Patrick Allen died, when I first heard that, I thought, did he record all this before he died? All these things? But, no, it is an impersonator. So he's very good. Tom Adams is very good, and Joanna Dunham, who... I was watching a film called, is it The Greatest Story Ever Told? Big biblical epic.
Should be.
And was it...
The one with John Wayne
and Claude Rains and Jose Ferrer and all these people in it, Sidney Poitier.
Max von Sydow as
Jesus. Max von Sydow is very good, actually. And it was on at Easter. And I think, was it Mary Magdalene? Or is a woman who's going to be stoned.
Right.
That... I'm not a great biblical scholar, but, there was going to be... whoever cast the first stone. And this actress was really running, and she was very attractive, very beautiful actress. I thought, I know her, I recognise her. Where have I seen her from? And I thought it was an American actress. Right. Because it's an American film.
Yeah.
And then I went on IMDb, because I couldn't wait for the end credits, and it was Joanna Dunham.
Right.
And I thought, well, that's quite a big part in a film that's got Charlton Heston, John Wayne, Claude Rains, all these people in it. Sort of, and she was... playing Donald Pleasance is in it as a devil. Right. So.
Wow, okay.
So, she's great. They're all, I think it's that story. It's not the most memorable, isn't it? It doesn't stand out in any real way. It's never going to be anybody's favourite, but I think it's a good one. It's well done anyway. I think it is quite eerie and it is quite scary.
It's well directed. We should acknowledge that another very good podcast, Smersh Pod, has recently talked about this film, and I think they pointed out that the scene where Denham Elliott is looking over the river and sees Dominic on the other side is very strikingly done, both because you first see Dominic as a reflection on the water, but also because the scene is in daylight. John Carpenter-ish. Counterintuitive. That's the first time you see the apparition at all, so he doesn't loom out of the shadows at first.
Well, he picks up a piece of paper, doesn't he? That's thrown in the water. So.
Yeah. That's a great scene. So there are lovely moments in it. Yes, but there's better to come. So let's move on to the second segment. So the second segment. Do you remember what the titles are?
No, I don't actually. I think the second one might just be called Waxworks.
Oh yes, right.
I can't remember what the first...
I remember that. That's ridiculous. the first one is called
Method for Murder.
Third one's called Sweets for the Sweet.
Yes,
I know. The fourth one might be just The Cloak or something.
Yeah, the fourth one is the Cloak. Anyway, doesn't really matter. But we should say that maybe it matters a bit more than it would in a movie where the script was by Milton Subotsky, because he just seemed to be happy to just very prosaically name all the stories after whatever the monster is.
Werewolf.
But this one has a bit more of a poetic streak. However, story 2 is just called The Waxworks.
I think it's called Waxworks or The Waxworks or something.
So in this story, this is the one with Peter Cushing. I would say it's possibly the best part of the film, but also weirdly has some of the naffest things in it. So Peter Cushing plays a retired stockbroker called Philip Grayson who leases the house. He's looking for a nice home to retire to. He's a man alone. We don't get the impression he's ever had a family, and he seems to be haunted by a lost love who he's got a picture of, and there's a lot of very thoughtful, kind of almost morose sequences early in the story where you see him sitting at home alone listening to classical music, reading a book. Then he's standing by the river outside just looking across, or he's walking through the town and there's no ambient sound. We just hear the kind of very sonorous, very kind of sombre classical tune that he was.
I think that music is called Death and the Maiden, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Right. Yeah.
I think that is called Death and the Maiden.
Right. Okay.
Insert, yes, according to Google, the tune is Death and the Maiden by Franz Schubert. I didn't know that before. That's how erudite I am.
Yes, he walks around. I mean, this was made in 1970, before Peter Cushing's wife died, but when she was ill.
Yeah.
And I think you can see that. There's something in the eyes and this slightly pained look that he has. And there's a nice moment when he's looking through some old theatre programmes, and I think some of them were plays he was in.
I believe
like School for Scandal and things like that, and Hamlet, and there is this photograph of presumably a woman he was in love with and it didn't work out and everything, who is the actress Nicola Paget, which I didn't know until recently. I looked it up. I knew I recognised her. I knew I recognised this woman, this actress in this photograph. And all she is, she doesn't appear in it, she's just in the photograph. I thought, I know her, I definitely know her. And then it was only the other day, I thought, I'm going to find out who that is, or let's see if I can find out. And it was Nicola Paget, so it was a very attractive actress. Yes, he seems rather forlorn and rather a lonely man living in this house.
And that tone is so nicely, subtly evoked that I think that's what lends this segment a level of power that the rest of the film doesn't have. But I'm almost not sure where it comes from. Is it just the look in Cushing's eyes? And also, a little later in the story, we meet another character who is Cushing's old former friend stroke love rival, played by Joss Ackland, who is probably 20 years younger than Cushing.
Yes, that's what makes it intriguing, that whole relationship. And there's a good line where Joss Ackland says, Peter Cushing looking at the picture says, we could never have won her.
Yeah.
We're not winners, you and I.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that because it's so ambiguous. They don't explain who this woman was or how they felt about her, what happened. Did they fall out because of her, or was it a different time?
Even when Joss Ackland is introduced, there's a knock at the door. Cushing's reading his book or whatever, and he goes to open the door, and Ackland is there, and he says, "My dear Philip," and then he just says, "Friends," and Cushing says, "Of course."
There's so much in that.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like they've sort of haven't seen each other for a long time, and this is some kind of reconciliation. Who was this woman that had such effect on them? And that's all very intriguing and all very kind of, it's all quite moving, I think.
Yeah, I think
it is
so.
moving. But I think knowing what Cushing was going through at that time
adds resonance
adds to the resonance of it if you know. If you don't know, it sort of...
and I think that even though Ackland is appreciably younger, they still have a very believable sense of history between them, and you can kind of feel that. And all of that sadness is really effective. And also, I had a thought about the playbills that he's looking through in the photo of the woman. So that photograph is clearly an acting headshot, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
So I thought, okay, so the script has told us that he's a retired stockbroker, but is he a retired actor? He seems to be a retired actor. And then I thought, oh no, maybe he isn't. Maybe he was in love with an actress, and these are all her plays that he's looking at. Because to me, that photo looks definitely like an acting headshot. It's not an ordinary photo of a person, is it?
But I don't know whether that's just because they needed a photograph quickly, and so they used that one, and because it's not on screen for that long, you know, it is an acting, and she's an actress, so in real life, so it's all very moving, and there's a very good dream sequence in it, which is the best thing. And I know we can't spoil anything.
I think I know what you're going to say, so let me set the boundaries. So, well, it's the title of the story. The story is called Waxworks. So Grayson, Peter Cushing, goes for a walk in the town. He finds a kind of Madame Tussauds-style waxworks museum, and in it is a woman, the figure of a woman who he finds very reminiscent of this lost love of his. And it disturbs him so much that he leaves, but he has nightmares about it. Then when Joss Ackland's character turns up, they end up going to the waxworks again. He sees the figure and he becomes obsessed with her. And there is a spooky owner of the waxworks, played very effectively by the actor Wolfe Morris, who he's another he's a stalwart of many British TV shows and films of the 60s and 70s. He's very good at being either sinister or frightened or both.
He's very sinister in this.
Yeah. But that is the outline of the story, but it contains the naffness, which is the Waxworks Museum itself.
Yes, when I first saw this film, we're going back to the 1980s though, when I was a teenager, I really didn't understand this story at all. I didn't understand what was going on.
Right.
It made no sense to me. And the reason is because the waxwork that is supposed to look like Peter Cushing's lady friend, which is supposed to be Salome.
Yes.
And with John the Baptist's head on a platter.
Right.
Because that waxwork doesn't look like Nicola Paget,
right.
Or doesn't look like anybody, doesn't look like anybody vaguely human, I didn't make that connection. Right. I thought, why is he so fascinated just with this waxwork of this woman? I don't understand why he's so obsessed. It's only when I watched it again years later, I thought, no, she is supposed to look like the woman in the photograph, Nicola Paget. And then it does make a kind of sense. But because that wasn't clear to me, when the first few times I saw it, I thought, I don't, it's not that I don't like it, I just don't understand it. I don't understand why people are behaving the way they are, because I don't see the connection between things. So that, the waxwork of Salome, who's supposed to look like Peter Cushing's ex-girlfriend, doesn't look, isn't very good. Yeah. Like those, get them in the paper sometimes, the world's worst waxwork places, and they look nothing like,
And that's, dear listener, that is why we chose to open this episode with our spoofy waxwork sketch, which is kind of inspired by this. And it is, to me, it's a paradox that this story is so lovely and so beguiling and powerful, but has this kind of deep naffness at the centre of it.
Maybe they could do it, maybe they could have got Nicola Paget to stand still.
Yeah.
And put some makeup on and then have her standing there. It still might not have worked, but it works better than what we've got, which
I feel
is just
like
a really bad waxwork.
That's what Freddie Francis would have done if he directed it, and it would have been Clytie Jessup.
Yeah.
Just like she's doing the shears in Torture Garden. She was good at standing still for ages.
Very good. It's a rare skill, that,
Yeah, absolutely. But sadly they didn't go down that route. I wonder about the order that the segments were filmed in. Yes. Was this kind of done at the end, and that there was not so much of the budget left for things? Because I feel like that the last segment with John Pertwee makes some very pointed jabs at Hammer and about how cheap period horror movies are, and I feel like maybe they wouldn't have done that had they already made a really cheap sort of Gothic horror sequence for the movie.
It might be a bit hypocritical when and that's the only thing. If the waxworks were better, it would work so much better, and it would be, because it is eerie and it is unsettling, and I find it now much more effective than I did then, because I understand what's going on. And there is a dream sequence which was apparently added afterwards because it was running short, so they needed to fill up the time, like they did in The Skull.
Right.
They added a dream sequence, which is like the best thing in the world, where Peter Cushing's going into the museum and everything, and all the other kind of waxworks look all right. I mean, you can't really see them properly, but it's just Salome is just so bad, and that affects the whole thing for me. It's just
well, it's an acting test for Ackland and Cushing, because they've both got to look at it. I mean, Ackland actually says, "She's almost alive. Yeah. She's beautiful."
Which,
she's
not. You're wondering if she was. They're both great actors, and Peter Cushing has to say something like, "She's beautiful," and suddenly, no.
Although this has an example of Cushing just being such a great actor, able to put a lot of meaning into very few words. When Josh Ackland says, "I don't think we should go back to that Waxworks Museum. There's something evil about that place." And Cushing just says, "Yes, there is." But, with real command.
Yes. He is such a great actor, yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
And he makes it.
Yeah, he does.
He makes it.
I think all of the best anthology movies benefit from his presence.
Yes.
And when he's not in them, it really kind of deflates the movie.
Well, the ones he isn't in aren't very good.
Yes, exactly. I only recently realised why do I think these ones are the worst. It's because he's not in them.
Yeah.
That's Vault of Horror he's not in. It's the only Amicus one that he's not in. And then of the later kind of non-Amicus anthologies that Milton Spotsky kind of just about pushed into existence, he's not in the Monster Club either, and that one is very flawed. So let's go on to the next segment then, which is the Christopher Lee segment, and as you mentioned is called Sweet to the Sweet, and it's also terrific, I think, and also it has Nara Del Porter, so we have two of the above the title stars, plus a very good child actress.
Well, I was going to say,
Chloe Frank.
This story for me, I know Christopher Lee's in it, Nara Del Porter's in it, and they're all very good, but for me this is distinguished by a brilliant performance by Chloe Franks.
Yeah.
Absolutely, she gets it completely how to play that part. And how old was she? 7 or 8? I don't know, but
I'm not sure.
She just knows how to do it. When you first see her, when she's in that scene, sitting in the chair and being all lonely and everything, and it really is. She's just tremendous.
Yeah,
and she was in a lot of Amicus films anyway. She's Trip.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't do that. I keep making this mistake of looking to see what people did later on in life. I thought I don't think she was an adult actress. I didn't see her anything. So I looked it up on IMDb and it said, in the 1990s, Chloe Frank suffered terribly from arthritis and had to give up her career, and now she's a great sort of activist. I thought, I wish I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. I don't like to think of it being, I get a bit of arthritis in the knee myself, and it's not pleasant. So, I wish I hadn't.
Well, if she's
she's still going, she's still around. She's one of the very few people from that film.
She's making a good difference to the world in some way, and she's found a path.
She was a wonderful child actress in that as well, and she was in a lot of films at that time. So hopefully she made a lot of money there. She's this little.
I don't know if she will have made a lot of money
in
this sector, but
maybe she put the money in the bank and it came in useful later.
But you were about to tell us the story of that segment.
Well, no, it's just Christopher Lee and his little daughter move into the house. He's a very sort of austere man, and there's something about his daughter that's a little odd, Chloe Franks, and then so he hires a nanny, doesn't he, or a teacher, whatever.
Yes, a governess.
A governess, that's it, and Nara Dawn Porter. And Nara Dawn Porter's looking after this girl, and, Chloe Franks, the little girl, says, I haven't got any toys, and I don't mix with the children and everything, and Nara Dawn Porter said, we've got to do something about that, so Nara Dawn Porter buys the little girl a doll, and Christopher Lee throws it on the fire. She can't have that, no.
Yeah.
Educational toys, and throws it on the fire. So, but that was, we don't want to give too much away.
I don't want to give away the ending, but I think it's okay to say that the story starts off with the implication that the child is very scared of her father and of other things. She's afraid of fire. But then slowly you start to realise, no, actually he's the one who's scared.
Yes.
He's scared of her, and we're not sure why. And we're kind of learning along with the Nara Dawn Porter character. So the story works really well as a suspense piece in terms of finding that stuff out. But it's also quite touching as a relationship piece because of the interaction between the governess and the child, which is very, very natural.
It's very well done and quite moving and everything, and you certainly yes, I mean, kind of Christopher Lee is sort of like the villain, but then, well, you can't give too much away, but also the victim in a way. But Chloe Franks is still the sympathetic one, as far as I'm concerned. There is a very funny bit actually in this, I have to say. When I watched it, I hadn't noticed it before. There's one bit where the power goes off and all the lights go out. And Christopher Lee opens a drawer, and he says, "Why are there only 4 candles?"
Yes.
And that nobody can say 4 candles for her. And then he runs up the stairs to Chloe Franks and says, "Why are there only 4 candles?" And I desperately wanted Chloe Franks to say, "What, candles for 4?"
Maybe Ronnie Barker, Ronnie Corbett saw this film.
Maybe yes, it is. But that's obviously not in the. But this one is it's one of those ones that's eerie and unsettling. It's not schlocky scary, it's sort of, there's an atmosphere of unease that's created, and what is actually going on between these people. Why does she not mix with other children? Why does Christopher Lee not talk about her mother, the child's mother, his wife, presumably? Why does he throw the doll on the fire and Yeah, it's very well done. Yeah, it is very. They're all well done in this. It's very well directed. I think this film. It's interesting that it wasn't Freddie Francis or Roy Ward Baker, because the ones that aren't directed by Freddie Francis or Roy Ward Baker, which is From Beyond the Grave and this one, to me have a different feel.
They do,
and they are a bit more serious, and they are a bit more sort of unsettling and less comic booky and less sort of, you know.
Well, Francis and Baker,
they're both excellent directors, by the way.
I love them, but their work, what do they call it? Like journeyman directors, you know, they're workaday directors, and they're both responsible for some brilliance and some not so brilliance, and to a certain extent, they will churn things out and just get the job done. Yes. And if that means creating a very broad kind of humour or a broad kind of horror, they'll do that. But this film is straining for something a bit more.
I think it is. I think Peter Duffell's taking it a bit more seriously and is trying to get certain effects across, which are less, certainly compared to the previous two. It's just a more serious film, slightly more austere and slightly more restrained. I think it's very restrained. Yeah. Like I say, there's no blood in this film. It's called The House That Dripped Blood. There is no blood in this film. There's none of that. At the time when Hammer was throwing gore at the audience, I think it's very... Well, I hesitate to use the word intellectual, but it's more literate, I think, and so and this story particularly is sort of done in that way, and there is an ending which...
It's a powerful ending, Before we talk about the final story, I just want to mention the music. Did that make any impression on you?
It was good, because it wasn't Douglas Gamley.
Right. Who is the guy who will score every subsequent anthology from Amicus?
Of who I'm not a great enthusiast, aficionado. Yeah, no, the music's fine.
The music is by a composer called Michael Dress, who I've never heard anything else from. But it's really funny on the opening credits that he does this kind of a tonal thing, with just various bursts of scary sounds, really. Yeah. And as soon as his credit appears, music by Michael Dress, which in itself is quite an unusual name, that name comes up in huge letters and the music just goes, Dan!
I'm also amused by the credits because the art director is Tony Curtis.
Oh, yes.
And I just imagine, Tony Curtis running around doing everything. So, the music's fine. I think the music's really good in the last story, actually.
I have things to say about that story, but the music had not really occurred to me in that one. It's mainly in the Cushing piece with the classical music. I think of that music there. The rest of the film I thought was very restrainedly spooky, and the music was not really intrusive or really noticeable, except there's a certain tenderness to it, especially in the Chloe Franks scenes. Yes. There's a nice...
the music was unobtrusive, which is a good thing. I think it just complemented what was going on. But it's just that there's a scene in the last one where John Pertwee's walking to the shop, where there's a very nice piece of music, I think.
Well, let's talk about the last story then. So, in order to get from story 3 to story 4, we have another linking bit with the inspector, but this time he goes and speaks to the actual estate agent who's been letting this house. That sets up kind of the ending of the film as well. And the estate agent says, I can tell you another example of something. Oh, no, he's talking about the specific guy who's gone missing, who the inspector is looking for, which is this horror film star, Paul Henderson, played by John Pertwee, although originally intended for Vincent Price.
And it would have been nice if it had been Vincent Price. John Pertwee's great.
John Pertwee is great.
But to have had Vincent Price in the film playing a horror star...
Well, I've got mixed feelings on this, because I wish he was in it, but also I think that if he was in it playing a horror star but who's not him, it would make me compare it unfavourably to the brilliant radio series The Price of Fear, in which Vincent Price plays himself but gets involved in kind of horror stories. But I do think this script almost seems to be written for Price, because that moment where the character is on the set and arguing with the director and says, how many films have you made? And I've made hundreds, and and that seems to be based on a moment in the making of Witchfinder General when Vincent Price wasn't getting on with Michael Reeves, and he apparently said to Reeves, I've made over 100 films, how many have you made? And Michael Reeves said, I've made 2 good ones. And from that point on, Price was sufficiently cowed. Which is a shame because we love him and he's always great, but he
Yes,
he did make some terrible films, of course, like they all did. So in this story, we flash back to the last weeks of the character who's gone missing, who is the film star Paul Henderson. He's a guy who's starred in hundreds of horror films, and he was making a new horror movie called Curse of the Bloodsuckers, a vampire film, ironically co-starring Ingrid Pitt, who was Hammer's star from the movie The Vampire Lovers, which was not out yet when this movie was being shot.
Oh, right, I thought,
I mean, I think it had been made, but it had not yet been released. So Amicus were just kind of quite canny and probably just grabbed her for a couple of weeks because they knew that she was going to be a big thing. And she gets the credits at the start of the movie, and she's fantastic. And there is a really nice kind of comic interplay between her and Pertwee. So they're co-stars. They may also be lovers. The first thing you see in the story is they're riding together.
Well, yes, that's a nice bit where
they're
in the car together. There's that sort of silent movie music
kind
of thing with it. John Pertwee does this wonderful thing, does it as the Doctor as well, where he sort of looks at somebody and looks them up and down and goes,
right.
he does it to the estate agent. It's just a little thing that he does, which I kind of always find quite amusing. So
we should just say, for the benefit of the listener, that you looked them up and down and then did a little nod.
If you watch the film when he first meets the estate agent, he does it. Which is, it just sort of nods like that. Yeah, you're all right, kind of thing. Yes, he moves into the house, doesn't he? And he's making this terrible film, and
yes,
and a little in-jog about Christopher Lee as well.
Oh yes. But what about the classic movies, the classic monsters, Dracula, the Bela Lugosi, of course, not this new fellow. And then this is the moment in the film where Jonathan Lynn appears, who would later go on to be the vaunted co-writer of the BBC sitcom Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister. But then he went to Hollywood and made some movies like Clue and My Cousin Vinny.
I think he also made the big screen version of Sergeant Bilko, which I'm naturally against.
Afraid. Yes. Well, you're not the only one.
No. Sacrilege.
His career was not glittering, but we should mention him because a few years ago you and I acted in a play about the behind the scenes of Yes Minister, written by our esteemed colleague Ian Winterton. I played Jonathan Lynn, and after doing that started to spot him in small roles in loads of 70s things. So he's in Dad's Army, I think he's in Cold.
I think he was also part of that kind of satirical group, maybe doing things with John Bird and John Fortune and Ellen Braun, maybe some kind of like satirical comedy shows of the early 70s, and then that's how he sort of... Because I've seen him in a few, I know he's a writer, but I've seen him acting in quite a few things as well when he was younger. So.
And he's got a very distinctive face with those boggly eyes.
Yes.
And he's got a nice moment in this film when they're on the set of Curse of Bloodsuckers, and he's showing his model of the castle design to Paul Henderson, saying, "Isn't this great?" And Paul Henderson, "Yes, I thoroughly approve of that. However, the full-size version..." The camera pans over to this kind of threadbare-looking fake castle set, and Pertwee says, "Any similarity between that model and this set is purely coincidental."
Some of Hammer's films at that time were looking a little bit threadbare. When you think about Scars of Dracula, some of the sets, and Lust for a Vampire and things like that we talked about. So that joke is sort of, quite pointed and does have a certain meaning, So anyway, he's starring in this film he doesn't like, and he's made all these horror films, even though he doesn't look quite old enough to have been in hundreds of films.
No, I mean, we should say this is made when John Pertwee had just done the first year of being Doctor Who, so he would have been 50-ish.
50-odd, yes.
But I think it's important to the story, actually, that the movie has terrible production values because he says, "This costume's no good, I'm going to go and source my own cloak," which is the thing that John Pertwee would do himself,
Yes, he would do that,
and notably, his costume in Doctor Who is his own grandfather's clothes, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So he finds a card for a costumier called Theo von Hartmann. And he goes to this place and discovers this kind of dusty costume and prop store run by Jeffrey Baildon.
Another great character actor, who became a bit of a kind of Well, he's done a lot of Amicus films. It was like a good luck charm, because sometimes he'd only be in them for a minute.
Yeah.
Tales from the Crypt, he's just like the guide.
Yeah.
So he's only in, it's a nothing part, but let's put him in it because he's part of the gang. But in this one, he's made up to look like Ernest Thesiger.
Yeah.
In is it The Bride of Frankenstein?
Yes.
The Old Bride of Frankenstein. And
I think, I've never seen Old Dark.
I think it is The Bride of Frankenstein. Right. He looks, and he said, "I do not patronise the kinema."
Yes, it's interesting that this guy runs a costume shop but has never seen a movie. Anyway, Henderson explains, I'm looking for an authentic vampire's cape, and Von Hartmann says, I have the very thing, and brings out this item for him. Henderson is very taken with it and says, how much will it cost to hire for so many weeks? And he says, oh no, you can have it for life. Which is maybe a vaguely threatening comment, but Henderson doesn't pick up on the implication. After he leaves, there is a shot of Baildon saying, and now I can rest in peace. So again, we have kind of comic foreboding connected to all this. And I think that this whole segment is a lovely, warm, humorous piece, which does have an undercurrent of unease to it, which I really like. But it's also going for the big laughs. There are bits later in the story where Pertwee is thoroughly mugging. And also, I don't think we should spoil what happens, but there's like a later sequence where Pertwee's on screen doing some comedy acting, but I think in the post-production they've thought he's not mugging enough, so they've done more kind of ooh, which I'm sure is not him, or he wouldn't have naturally done. So I think there are points where it kind of tips a bit too far into straining for the comedy.
Yes, yeah.
But I think that the storyline, basically, it's a magic cloak and it gets him into bother. And I think that concept is a really nice little basis for a little comedy interlude. And Pertwee's great, Baildon's great, Ingrid Pitt is great. I don't think there's much else I can say without spoiling it.
No, yeah, I don't want to spoil it. Yeah, it is. I mean, I didn't watch it again. I know it's supposed to be the comedy story in a way, the lighter stuff, but I actually found it quite moving that this actor had done all these films and had this reputation, but he was doing now films he didn't like, and he was sort of typecast, which you could say about some of the real horror film actors, that they get typecast and sometimes have to do things that aren't very good. And so to me there was undercurrent of sort of wistfulness and sort of about him, and there is when he's walking, when he goes to Geoffrey Baildon's shop, there's just a very nice piece of music which is kind of quite haunting and quite sort of gentle and suggests that this man is actually quite sad and as successful as he is, there's something unfulfilled about him, and he's now stuck doing things he doesn't want to do. And I found that quite moving.
Yeah, there is a sense that his bravado, his eccentricity, his forcefulness is kind of a cover. And what's he really got underneath? And he might actually be quite lonely.
Yeah.
And again, like the fact that you're not really sure if he's got a very meaningful relationship with Carla. She hangs around with him, but they're not like an obvious couple.
Well, I'm not going to give away the ending, but he doesn't know something about Carla, which if they were involved, I think he probably would know. So. I
suppose, But that's the last story. So we've covered all the stories in the film, and then we get the ultimate ending, but it connects to the ending of the fourth story, which we've just not revealed, so we can't really say much about the ultimate twist. But we do get a recurrence of the A.J. Stoker character, the estate agent, who turns to the camera and does the speech which you quoted earlier, where he talks about the house reflecting the personality of its inhabitants. Again, I don't see how that works.
I don't.
How does it reflect the John Pertwee's character, for instance?
Well, I mean, only in a kind of obvious way. It reflects. Danny Elliott is a man who creates monsters. That's his job, and then he creates a real monster, as it were, and then he gets going. But no, that's a very loose, kind of tenuous thing, I think, as if they were trying to find something to connect them all. And there was one kind of, there's a nice line in it where John Bennett's talking to Mr. Stoker, and Stoker says, "What about your own house? You live in a flat. Is it a bit cold?"
Yeah.
And as if they're trying to reinforce that idea that a house, whatever, not just that house, but anybody's house, reflects the personality of the person living in it, kind of thing. But I don't think that really... It doesn't spoil anything or anything. It's just a very loose kind of... As if they're trying to suggest something at the end, something last minute.
I think somehow it occasionally undermines the power of the stories themselves. Like the end of the Christopher Lee sequence. Won't say what the detail is, but immediately after the story ends, it cuts to John Bryans saying it wasn't about what he believed or what she believed, it was the house. It's like, no, the story was all about them.
No, it was they just happened to be living in the house.
Yeah.
I would also say that in that one, Christopher Lee is seen reading Tolkien, so he deserves everything he gets.
Yes, a rare instance of Lee bringing parts of his real life to the character in the way that Cushing did all the time.
Yeah. It was always his wife's photograph in films, isn't it? So.
But also things like in the Sherlock Holmes where he would decorate the set, and then in this one where he's using his own programs from plays he was in and things. Well, I don't know whether he brought them or whether it was just a coincidence that they found them and he went, oh, those are the ones I was in. I'm not sure, but yes. So that's The House That Dripped Blood. I think overall, then, I would say we're both very enthusiastic about this movie.
Yes, I'm watching it again, and I watched it last week. And it is a film I've watched periodically over the 40 years since I first started watching these things. And like I say, the second story I didn't really understand when I first saw it. But now I do understand it. And I just think it was very well made, very well directed, very well written. There's a lot to it. It is quite haunting. It is quite affecting. All the performances, there's a great cast. They're not all the kind of big stars that later came, you haven't got your Charlotte Ramplings or your Diana Dawes, whatever. But everybody's brilliant in it. Jeffrey Bale and John Bennett, all these actors are really good. The only thing that slightly bothered me, and this applies to a lot of Amicus things as well, and again, try not to spoil it, is how can people tell the stories? How can they know exactly what happened?
You're right.
Because a lot of the people in those stories don't survive to the end. So how does John Malcolm, the policeman, know what happened? And that's always... But I think you have to go with... I do remember when I was at university and Tales from the Crypt was on, and I'd never seen it before. And I was so excited to see it. This was about 1999. And my mate Chris, fellow Columbo fan, he was staying with his parents that weekend, so he watched it there. So anyway, when we got to uni on the Monday morning, he said, I watched Tales from the Crypt. I know you're into that sort of thing, so I watched Tales from the Crypt. He said, I enjoyed it, but how the hell did all those blind people get those razor blades? And how can they stick them to the wall without cutting themselves to pieces? And I said, welcome to the wonderful world of Amicus anthologies. Because you have to go with it. You have to suspend your disbelief, even more so than normal. And if you can go with it, that's great. You'll enjoy it. Don't think too much about it. You just go with what happens, and if you do that, and I think some people perhaps can't do that. They think that doesn't make sense. That wouldn't happen. How can he do that? Well, yeah, but just go with it, and you'll enjoy it. Yeah. So even though there are plot holes, inconsistencies, they never bother me, because Jonathan Rigby in the English Gothic book, we've got a copy here, I think it kind of bothers him. He says, these stories are anecdotal and well, maybe, but yes they are, but they are what they are. This is what this genre is. So just take it for what it is and don't think too much about it, and just go with it.
Ultimately they're little nasty jokes, aren't they? And those kind of deeper logical questions don't really matter in an EC horror comic.
No.
And they're not meant to. Peter Hutchings, in his chapter about Amicus, which has been republished in the latest edition of his... I mean, he's dead now, but he wrote a book called Hammer and Beyond, the British horror film, and in his chapter about Amicus, he talks about how you're just supposed to be stunned every now and then into a momentary awareness. You're not. It doesn't necessarily inform you of anything particularly. You're not being told what to think or given a particular perspective. You're not thinking, oh, that was, justice or whatever. You're just supposed to think, oh, that's a bit weird. That's a bit. Isn't that extraordinary? So, like the bit in Tales from the Crypt where Joan Collins murders her husband. We never really know what their relationship was like. No. And we're not supposed to really judge her for it. It's just the inciting incident for a nasty story, and we follow what's happening. It doesn't really matter why she did it.
No, it's like there's nothing before the story starts, there's nothing after, it's just the story. Yeah. It's like in Vault of Horror. Daniel Massey murders his sister, and then the next thing he does is go to a restaurant where everybody can see him.
Yeah.
But he's got to do that because the restaurant is full of vampires, and that's what happened. You can either go with that or you can't. Some people can't, perhaps. They think, no, it's too irrational, it doesn't make sense, it wouldn't do that. But in this film world, in the world of Amicus anthologies, people do that. People go to restaurants when they commit murder, so they could, and that's never bothered me. That part of it has never bothered me. The illogicality of it, those kind of inconsistencies, whatever you want to call them, that's never bothered. You just take it for what it is, and when the punchline happens, and there's usually a nasty punchline, something bad happens to somebody, that's what it is, and then don't think too much about anything after. It's just like Tales of the Unexpected, or those sort of series. It's it is what it is.
I think so. Well, getting back to this film particularly, I think that the power of this film is in that each story within itself doesn't actually have any of those moments. The stories do make sense, and they tend to have more resonance. It's the framing story which is the kind of weak link, I think. But all the stories themselves, which make up 95% of the movie, they're really good.
Yes, there are none of those inconsistencies, and they all make sense on their own. There's nothing where you say, "Oh, come on," they all work.
Yeah. So therefore, I think this is one of the stronger ones.
I think this is a really good one. Yes.
I think if it had a really good linking story, like as good as the one in Asylum, for instance, then I think it would probably be the best one.
Yeah. But I don't think the link is always terrible.
No, it's fine.
It's
enough.
It's just a bit weak. It's just a bit so-so kind of thing. But
I think it has quite a good ending.
Yes, yeah.
Which we want.
But it is. I think it's watching it again. Well, watching it again the other day, I enjoyed it. And what else need be said?
Yeah,
you'll enjoy it. It's just a bit of entertainment, a bit of escapism. That's what Milton Subotsky wanted to make. Just film, because you always feel with Milton Subotsky, he loves making these films. He really enjoys actually making them. They're made with real affection, real love. He loved Dead of Night when he saw it when he was young, and that's what he wants to do. And Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, the reason I love it so much is because he loved it so much. I just get the feeling I'm going to put a werewolf in this film, I'm going to put a vampire in there, I'm going to put a man-eating plant, and everything's going to be him. There's going to be Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, and then Roy Castle, and put everything in, and he makes it, and there's a kind of glee, I think, about him making these films. They became a little more serious in the 70s because 70s stuff is less gaudy than 60s stuff, So 70s is the Sweeney, 60s is the Avengers, That's there's a different sensibility and a different attitude. But yes, some of the films that maybe don't work so well, some of the stories don't work so well. Maybe there are lapses of logic and everything, and maybe they're not as well crafted as the Hammer films sometimes. Maybe some of the better Hammer films, but I just think they're just so wacky, and so they just want to entertain people. They're not pretentious. They're not cynical. They're not. They just enjoy this film. You'll be taken out of the real world for an hour and a half, and there'll be monsters, and
they tend to be very good value for money.
And they've got lots of great actors in.
Yeah, and so we've got on to talking about the other films. Let's do that. But, dear listener, you will need to wait until the follow-up episode of the podcast to hear that discussion. Not the very next episode. The very next episode is going to be about Halloween Kills. And to reiterate, if you're a Patreon supporter, you can hear that discussion and see the video already
on the Patreon page. Everybody else, you'll have to wait a little longer. It'll be out before Halloween. In the meantime, enjoy the continuing October season, and you'll hear from us again soon. Bye bye.